Fellow Agilists, welcome to the final episode of Season 2 of the Virtually Agile podcast. Now, today's guest is a fellow Agile enthusiast and active contributor. You were heavily involved in the Agile 20 Reflect Festival, which was held back in February and celebrated 20 years since the Agile Manifesto was created. And I believe you're actually involved in the continuing to shape how that new iteration of what is now Access Agile will progress as well. He is the leader of the future, or a leader of the Future of Work Scotland community, a speaker at many an event, meetup, and conference, and you've held various agile and engineering roles over a career spanning over 20 years. I am pleased to welcome Sat Singh to the show.
Hey, Chris, good to be here, mate. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you. It has been a while. Now, for anyone who isn't familiar with Sat and what he's about, Sat, would you please tell us a little bit more about you?
Hey, oh wow, okay, right. I'll keep it short. I think you covered it brilliantly. To be honest, it's a 20-year journey for me, over 20 years. As you say, I'm Sathpal Singh. Everybody calls me Sath. Yeah, I'm very passionate about technology, engineering. The role that's actually played in society and how that's increased and the ubiquity of it. I marry that with my passion for agile ways of working and enhancing collaboration. And over the last certainly 2-3 years, my work in the sort of community space, both in Scotland and then further afield with festivals like Agile 20 Reflect. So I often say I sit at the intersection of engineering and agile, because that's kind of where I think best summarises kind of where I operate, because I have a very heavily sort of technical background. I did start as a software engineer, what seems like a long time
ago. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting because you have a very technical background. I am the opposite. Yeah. I look at the code and it looks like the matrix to me. It's ones and zeros. I've always been, I guess, I would describe myself as more of a people focused coach, and I've never found it stop me being successful. But at the same time, I won't profess ever to tell someone how to code, how to develop things. I just want to provide an environment that helps them continuously improve. And I think that's where my focus lies. Now, you kind of touched a little bit on society a moment ago. And right now we are amidst this, what they're calling the Great Resignation. There's a bit of a war between employees and employers over returning to the office. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts on this debate? Is there going to be a winner and a loser? What do you think is going to happen?
I hope there won't be losers. You're right, it's a big debate, right? So, in fact, we were having it earlier this morning in a meeting I was in at work, and I think one size doesn't fit all. Okay, so I'm stating the obvious there. It sounds a bit cliched, but it doesn't. And I think there needs to be options, and there needs to be organisations need to be working with their staff to support them in maximising the way they're going to work together and their outcomes. And if that's best delivered remotely, then so be it. If that's best delivered on premise, and so be it. But I can't get away from the hybrid environment. I think there needs to be a bit of both. It's best of both worlds. I mean, from my standpoint personally, I'm not in an office at the moment. I think I've been massively productive over the last 16 months. I certainly don't think I would have done a lot of the extra voluntary stuff that I got involved in. Take Agile 20 Reflect. We're working around the clock. The whole of February, and I hosted like something like 18 events. Okay. And I attended, 20 plus others, and I was a speaker at about 5. So that's about nearly 50 events, right? I couldn't have done that if I was commuting to an office every day. But I would still like to go into an office from time to time where it makes sense to do so, and see people face to face. And there's certain types of meetings that perhaps lend themselves better to a face to face environment. I think we've shown we can work effectively in a distributed manner, but yeah, I think you need to strike the balance. But you can't get away from the fact that lots of organisations have got office spaces, and they're paying in some cases handsomely to have those spaces. So that's kind of where the debate is, right? I mean, I don't know if there's an easy answer. I don't know if I answered your question there.
I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on it. It's a topic that for me that I really enjoy debating about and hearing people's perspectives about
Mm,
because it does very much differ. You may be someone like myself who, in the past year, I've been into the office 3 times, and two of those times have been in the past month. And in that time frame, I've been
wow, okay.
promoted. I've been very successful in what I do. So my working location has never been a factor. Now it probably helps that I bill myself as a virtual agile coach, and one of my areas of specialism is remote facilitation. So it probably helps. But it also,
Mm,
as you were touching upon, the reduction of the commute time has enabled me to do more externally outside of work. So the kind of community stuff, the events I speak at, the learning that I've been able to do on top of just the day job, the access to people. One of the things I think I've loved the most is, if you think of, let's go back 2 years. You want to go to a meetup to meet fellow agilists, or learn a new topic. You're limited typically to, I'm going to go to Agile Reading or Agile Northampton or whatever it may be, and you go and meet some people face to face, and you might meet 10 to 20 people. Now I can join a meetup in Texas, or recently Princeton at midnight it was for me, and I gave a talk to them, and I met some people
mm,
I would never have been exposed to. And so the pandemic, I think, has almost rapidly accelerated our global networking. That's been one of the big wins for me.
correct.
But I think, coming back to your
No,
point,
agreed.
it's
I
it's
cannot
not a one
argue with that.
size fits all solution.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't a one size fits all solution. You have some people who
But you,
prefer to work from the office; they're more productive there.
no, absolutely. And I think the other thing you touched on there, which I think I can definitely relate to with my work running the Future of Work Scotland meetup, is, that geographical barrier is gone. And I think we've admirably demonstrated that. So, we've had amazing plethora of speakers over the last, 16 months. In 2020, in that meetup, we were running a weekly event series, and we hosted over 30 events over 2020. Prior to that, we were, booking venues, they were bi-monthly, the usual beer and pizzas. You know, we've moved away from all of that. And as you say, we're able to tune into events in anywhere in the world and sort of tap into other cultures and things. And I think that's fab.
Yes, from a neurodiversity perspective, it's ramped things up a little bit.
Mm,
I'm now accessing a network of people that I probably wouldn't have come across so readily, just by virtue of the fact that we've accelerated the global networking we do. Which, again, one of my favorite benefits of the pandemic. Unfortunately, it's been a terrible instance in many ways, but it has accelerated certain things, digital transformations and otherwise. And kind of, I guess, coming back to the crux of the question around hybrid working, and is there going to be a winner and loser and things like that, I
mm,
think the companies for me that are going to win are the ones that do tailor and offer genuine flexibility, rather than it being a one size fits all, everyone's in the office or everyone's remote. It might be they say, hey, you work from wherever you're most productive. You know, if you prefer to come in a few
yeah,
days a week, that's okay. If you prefer to work exclusively remotely because that fits your situation, that's fine too. And if you prefer to be in the office full time, we're here for you. The companies, I think, that tailor it rather than try and standardize and do a kind of blanket situation, I think those are the ones that are going to benefit, and they'll probably
yeah.
retain their
No,
people.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see, I think staff retention is going to be challenged by organisations who perhaps are not providing, the kind of setups that are conducive to the way people want to work, right? And I think it's got to be a consultation thing. I think organisations
Mm,
speak to their staff, try to understand what works, what doesn't, where the challenges are, and find something that's going to suit. But like I said earlier, I think it's about presenting options and giving options. And that's kind of what I'd be expecting. Sometime in the office, sometime remotely, strike the balance, give people that flexibility. I think that's a win-win situation.
mm. I also think it's interesting how working from home used to be a perk. You'd list it in your job
Mm,
recruiting profiles. You get to work from home. Nowadays, it's probably more of an expectation. You don't need to specifically call out that you're able to work from home. It's probably more of an expectation. And actually, the
yeah.
companies that go a little bit further to make it a perk again, I think are the ones that might win out. I'm seeing examples of companies who say, well, we want you in 2 to 3 days a week, but 6 weeks a year, you can work from wherever in the world you like. I'm seeing examples of companies saying, well, we're going to buy these hotels in this foreign country and create like a little digital nomad environment, and you can have discounted rates of going in and having like a workcation there. There's lots of companies that are just doing
Mm.
different things when it comes to celebrating the hybrid and remote working practices. I'm keen to see how it plays out.
Yep. Definitely, definitely. I think
Now,
there's more to come.
absolutely. So remaining with the I guess the hybrid and remote working topic here.
Mm.
You've just said you've been doing it for 16 months. Are there any particular techniques or any top tips that you have learned that you would share with our listeners with regards to helping teams or organizations be successful, even though they may not be face to face anymore?
Oh wow, okay. I think you're going to be open to trying things. I think it has been hard to run certain types of events. You lose the kind of obvious visual cues, etc. Right. So even now, there's only two of us on this chat. You've probably been in other meetings where maybe there's more people on there, and you get to a point where there's a robust debate, and people are actually sadly kind of talking over one another, right? So I think you've got to, at the outset, maybe agree some sort of ground rules, right? Just go, how are we going to facilitate this? How are we going to maximize the output and ensure that there's a flowing conversation, right? Because you'll see both. You'll see situations where it's well facilitated and everybody's getting heard and everybody gets the opportunity to speak, but you need to kind of create that environment, right? And I think when you're in a virtual environment, you've got to try a little bit harder to do that. To pay attention to it,
Very
be
good
be
points.
conscious of it,
Pay attention.
deliberately go out of your way to actually create that. And I've seen it done well, and naturally, I've seen it where it's not perhaps gone so well. More experienced
Of
facilitators
course.
like yourself, you've been doing the sort of remote, kind of distributed sort of retros, etc., for a wee while now. And I think we need to be educating a bit more too. So I know you've done a lot of stuff in that space, but educating,
Mm,
sharing tips and helping teams understand where the pitfalls to avoid. Pitfalls to avoid.
mm.
So Jose
There's this,
Gazelle, don't you? Jose Gazelle? Do you know,
I
you know
believe so,
Jose?
yeah.
Yeah. So Jose and I did a bit of work way way back. So he wanted me to do some. So I do a bit of visualization stuff as well. You've probably seen it, and I created a bunch of sort of visual sort of cards with him, and this was to kind of enhance that experience remotely, where people can they're in training courses and they can hold up these cards, etc., to kind of maybe say they want to take a break or whatever it might be. They've got a question, or can we move on because you think that they've done that particular debate to death. But rather than speaking and interrupting, they can kind of and somebody's going to spot that visual cue and go, right, okay, James there is wanting us to stop for a break, right? Everybody agree, right? Fine. It's those sorts of little things that help the conversation along, and you can imagine as well the amount of effort that's gone into taking the traditional classroom-based courses that we're kind of used to. So if you think of it, when we've done our Scrum.org type training, so I did a PSM years ago, in a classroom environment, but I did a PSK in a virtual environment. It's a very different experience, but you want the same kind of output, don't you? So you've got to try a little bit harder to create that environment where people can still like collaborate and participate, and maybe exercises where they're doing things together and do the same thing that they might have done if they were congregated around a whiteboard, in a classroom-based
Mm,
environment. It's not easy, but I think we've learned a lot over the last 60 months or so, and we've, as I said earlier, we've proven it to work. But I think we've also found ways to make it even better, perhaps in a way in the past we hadn't
mm,
really needed to give it as much thought as we do now, given the situation we found ourselves in.
sure. I think for me, my go-to with regards to trying to create these sorts of environments where people understand how to move things forward, how to discuss and progress in meetings. This is the technique I would be subscribing to here are things like core protocols, having clear agreed ways that people resolve conflict, how they discuss with one another, what makes a good communication versus bad communication. Team charters are another one. Having a team alignment, we all understand this is how we move forward, this is how we handle meetings. And the thing I'm increasingly building in to the sort of work that I do as well is being someone who's so much a fan of retrospectives. How do I build in a feedback loop into almost every meeting to ensure that that meeting
Mm.
itself is still valuable, and could it be better? So you've got a stand up, for example, have a quick, up or down, or a fist of five. Was this useful? What could be better about it? And just gauge over the duration of an iteration or a sprint. Is it proving
Mm.
valuable? What could you try differently there? I build them into the retros that I do. There's a rate the retro concept. So I'm increasingly looking at how to, on a micro basis, continuously verify whether a meeting is still adding value. Because as we know, in the last 16 months, one of the consequences of not being face to face is more meetings get put in the diary. So how can we
Yep.
maximize the value of those meetings, or even always question, is this meeting even adding any value? Should it exist? Because I think so often a meeting is put in for a couple of reasons. One, you want to make everyone feel they're involved, so you just kind of go, "Oh, I'll just invite you just for awareness," even though that person probably doesn't need to contribute and is probably sat there on a call, or doing responding to Slack messages or working otherwise.
Mm.
To not make people feel left out. I always say that if you're not actively contributing to a meeting, you probably don't need to be there. So just decline it, and empowering people to decline a meeting, because there's a pressure. If you're invited to a meeting, you feel obliged to attend. It's just some basics, like so many meetings get sent out without an agenda, right? And you just join in this meeting, and then
Yes.
that meeting itself doesn't have much of a purpose. No one knows what it's there. They haven't prepared for it. There's lots of challenges there, I
Exactly.
think.
No, agreed. Agreed. Yeah, and I
Now,
think the agenda one's an old one, right? But it's become even more sort of pronounced in this sort of virtual sort of environment we're in now. So I think there's a lot of byproducts of this sort of stuff. So we're actually, like I said earlier, we're actually improving a lot of things that probably we ought to have been improving anyway, right?
mm,
And the pandemic, the distributed nature of work has kind of forced the issue in some ways. So I think there's lots of positives have come out of this situation.
absolutely. Now, you have been increasingly putting yourself out there in this past year. I've seen some content about this. You've been giving more talks, sharing various
Mm.
things, blogs, articles, telling stories. I think you wrote something saying and describing as being a chatterbox, which I thought amused me, which I liked. So, how are you finding putting yourself out there more? And what was the genesis of it? What inspired you to take this on?
Yeah, great question. So okay, so yeah, so you obviously seen an article I published recently, and I'm doing some collaboration stuff with Johanna Rothman at the moment. I'm doing a writing thing with Johanna, and it's great. And I love catching up with Johanna, and we do a sort of monthly, a weekly call on a Monday. So I'm kind of writing more anyway because I wanted to for a while. But to be honest, it's really about I'd been encouraged to do it in the past, and as it said in that very article, I'd kind of, for one reason or another, opted out, or perhaps shied away, or was reluctant, and I never got to the bottom of that reluctance. But ultimately, I think a lot of us feel like we don't have something of value, like to add or to say, and most of us suffer some sort of level of imposter syndrome, right? So Scott and I did a talk on that actually, Agile 20 Reflect, right? Because I think by doing these things, you kind of are encouraging others, and it might be of inspiration to someone, right? Somebody might look and go, yes, I can relate to that resonates with me. And it might encourage someone to do something that ordinarily they might just think, well, that's not for me. It's okay, yeah, I was chatty as a kid. I'm still quite chatty. I like a conversation, but it's like what a lot of us have done. You kind of play to your strengths, right? So it plays well when you're coaching. You're having those powerful collaborative exploratory conversations. And then, you marry that up with, good deep listening. But ultimately, it's sharing your messages because we are all unique and we've all got something valuable to contribute and add. But I think a lot of us often feel like we don't, right? For one reason or another. And that particular article tries to kind of get that out there. It's going, look, you might have shied away from doing that, meetup talk or getting in that conference proposal or, writing that piece and getting it on Medium, but don't, feel like you can, give it a go. Just give it a go. And, what's the worst that can happen, because I think people feel, reluctant because they think they're going to get shot down. And I think that's a little bit tragic because they're probably going to have something cool to say. Somebody's going to learn something from what they're saying. And I think that's what it's about. That's what I'm trying to say. That makes sense. You see where I'm coming from.
It does indeed. It does indeed. I mean, I am only recently, I guess in the past few years, begun doing the same myself. I realized I had some things that I felt people could benefit from and just started sharing things. And my logic and my mindset about it has always been that if one person gained value from it, one person read it and thought, oh, that resonates, or that helps, or that's something new I could try, then it's been of value for me sharing it. I think there can be a reluctance, particularly with the social media era we're in, where if you share something, and I think it is unfortunate that the LinkedIn algorithms are built in a way that someone invests a lot of time writing a nice article, they spend a lot of time doing it, and it doesn't get as much exposure as someone who shares a picture of a cat, for example, and it suddenly gets likes and likes and likes. And it's so sad to see because you can see the time investment and the care that someone's
Mm.
put into writing that article. And I think that can probably contribute to someone's reluctance to share things. But from my perspective, it's always been if one person gets value from it, if it challenges one person to think a little bit differently, then to me, it's been worthwhile putting out there.
Agreed. And that's exactly what I'm
And
trying to
it's,
say. Because we're actually all
yeah,
storytellers. We're all actually
I'm
storytellers.
definitely a storyteller. I'm definitely a storyteller. I love to tell stories, and I often have to practice. Well, I have over the years had to very much practice listening more. This was a very much a learning thing for me. I remember some of my failings over the years as an agile coach, and I love talking about my failures because I love destigmatizing failure. It was always I would introduce something in a session. It might be a retrospective, for example, and then you just get silence. And my mind was thinking, oh, silence is bad. I've got to fill that silence with something. Let me speak. Let me speak. Let me try and prompt people by doing something. And I've learned to just just pause, just listen a little bit more, spend less time speaking because it could be people are digesting the information. It might be that they're thinking. And actually, what I like about remote retrospectives at the moment in particular, particularly if you've got use of a virtual whiteboard, is you can ask the prompt question, whatever theme it is, ask the prompt question, and then just allow 3 to 5 minutes of silent reflection, just to note things down on a whiteboard. Doesn't put anyone under pressure to speak out right away. Can avoid those dominance hierarchies where some dominant voice could steer the direction of conversation towards something or somewhere else. And yeah, it can just create a bit more psychological safety, I find.
Yeah,
Okay, you
absolutely.
recently, we were talking about your talks and putting yourself out there. I believe you're doing a talk
Mm,
soon on social leadership. Where
mm,
has this
I
come
am.
from, this topic of social leadership? What's it all about?
Okay. Right. I'm not going to give too much away with the talk because you'll have to come and hear the talk, right? But yeah, so Future Work Scotland, Future Work Scotland. So as I mentioned earlier, 2020 we did a whole host of sessions, and one of our guest speakers during that particular period where we were doing sort of weekly sessions was a chap called Julian Stott. And Julian's an amazing guy. He's a wonderful he's a wonderful man. And he does a lot of stuff in the sort of storytelling, community development, social leadership space. So that's his arena. He's written countless books on this stuff. And he came along and he was a guest and he did a talk on that type of stuff. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I've done a few courses with him. He's got his own learning organisation, and I've done a sort of storytelling course, 12-week program. I did one of his cohorts, and I've also done his quiet leadership workshop. And to be honest, I think there's such powerful tools in the age and the era that we're in now. So we're in something called the social age. So we've been in the kind of previous sort of eras. We've been in the industrial age. We've been in the digital age. Now we're in the social age. And social age isn't about social media, right? Because we've been in that space for a while. That was actually the digital age. It's much more about the way that just some of the things you said earlier, the way that we come together, the way that we collaborate, the importance of kind of, the way we kind of tell stories and the way we kind of communicate, and the part that communities play in that's really what it's about. And it's about how organizations can actually really, really achieve what they're doing and build consensus by embracing some of these ideas and principles. That's what it's about. And I've actually been practicing some of these ideas and some of the things that social leadership's about in some of my initiatives in my day job. So I work in the financial services sector. I'm basically in sort of technology leadership, as I mentioned earlier, and I kind of run some sort of community development initiatives, sort of embedding and socializing sort of technology platforms across quite large populations, and a kind of large sort of global enterprise, talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And a lot of these things really resonate with me, and I've been kind of, applying those ideas and learning. And the more I've delved into it, and the more I've studied, and the more I've tried to apply it, and the more I've learned, and the more I've really got into it. And the talk is actually about that journey. It's about my journey into social leadership and learning it, understanding it, applying it, and what have I learned. And yeah, I'm really passionate about it, and it aligns with a lot of my other voluntary, commitments, as with the festival in February, and my work in Future Work Scotland. I'm active in the a few professional bodies. I'm now the chair of the BSIS Agile specialist group, and a few other things I'm involved in. So it's the ideas, the techniques, I think, are widely applicable.
Very interesting. And for anyone listening who wants to come along to your talk, when is it?
The next one I'm doing is actually next Wednesday evening, and that's with the good folks at Lean Agile Edinburgh. So the Lean Agile Edinburgh meetup, they are hosting me to do this talk. I'm doing it again. I've already done it once. I did it at the Lean Agile Global Conference in May. And it seemed to be well received. I got some really good feedback, and I've been invited to do it again at a few different meetups, and I'm also doing the same talk at Lean Agile Exchange in October. So it's
Wonderful. So a few opportunities there.
this year.
Few opportunities there for people to get involved and take part. Where my mind, just for awareness, where my mind went to when you were talking about this, was to one of my favorite writers, Stephen Fry, and he was talking about he's a big fan of Greek mythology, and he was talking about thousands of years ago, before technology and things like that, people came together and they would entertain each other by telling stories around the hearth. And the goddess of the hearth was Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. So people would gather around that campfire in the evening and they would tell stories of one another. And I think the reason I particularly resonate with you as a person is we both have a similar ethos about things. We love being part of communities. We love sharing. We love telling stories. And the sort of work that you're doing there, community building, being a social leader, very much aligns to the sort of values that I look to exhibit. I love sharing stories with people. I love creating an environment where people can share their learnings, their failures, their successes, their wins, their losses, their battle wounds, their scars, all those things. And there's so much benefit in doing so, I have found. It's something I've ramped up myself in the past year in particular, and I get so much value from it. And I don't do it for any monetary purpose. I've had lots of people ask me, could you go exclusive with us and do this or that? And I was like, well, that's not why I do it. I'm not motivated by that. I enjoy
So,
I enjoy the stories that people tell me back afterwards when they say, I tried this retrospective technique or tried this and it worked really well. Thank you for sharing. It's those sorts of things. It's the stories, it's the community that motivates and inspires me. So I look forward to listening in to one of your talks in the future and seeing if I can learn anything more about being a good social leader.
I think you definitely
Speaking,
display some of those behaviours. Yep, I've seen that. Yep, definitely. And
thank
I
you, I
talk about
appreciate
that.
that.
What makes a social leader? What makes a social leader? So yeah, it'd be great
Mm,
to see it one of them in the future.
good stuff. So, remaining on the topic of leadership, with the exception of
Mm.
social leadership, and I don't want you to go too much into the detail there. What to you makes a good leader in this era we're in today? This mixture of hybrid and remote. What are some of the qualities that you see good leadership or good leaders demonstrating with their people?
Yeah, quite a lot of stuff there, isn't there?
Mm,
Humility. So I think and I've been. So again, you talk there about scars, battle scars, and war stories and all that. We've all got them, right? We've all got them. I for one, I've certainly got a whole stack of them, right? And I've made my fair share of mistakes, but you learn from these, right? And I cast my mind back to when I was first in sort of my early management, so leadership roles, and that was kind of for me maybe 15 years ago or so. And then all the different things you learn as you progress, and the more you do it, and the more people you meet, the more you kind of raise your own self-awareness. So I also talk about that in the article you referred to earlier. I touch on it. I don't really get into it in a lot of detail, but I think the best leaders are those who demonstrate humility, authenticity. They behave. They are themselves. They're not trying to be something they're not. And also they practice good listening. They actually listen. They're interested in hearing other people, and also they're self-aware. They know their own flaws. I think
mm.
is important. And I think to me, I don't think it's everything, but to me, those are some of the ingredients that I think make some of the best leaders. Certainly in the social age. There, you brought me right back to even without even without meaning to. So, what are your
Didn't
thoughts
mean to
there?
try and
Does that
sneak you
does that
back
does
there.
that resonate?
It very much
Does
resonates,
that
and it's
resonate?
something I've learned over the years as well. So much, for me, one of the first things that one of the things I aim to do when I'm meeting a new group of people is be humble about it. Admit that I don't have all the answers, and that actually all I want to do is they're the experts. I want to create an environment where we can discover the answers together. We can experiment until we find what works. I'm a firm believer in bringing my whole self to the workplace. It's why I will quite happily wear random outfits to meetings. I've turned up to retrospectives fully dressed as a pirate. I had my interview with Lisa Adkins with Bishop's hat on. I'm basically a big kid at heart, and I bring that to the workplace. I don't mind being that, and I enjoy that about my work. And everyone's always very appreciative of it because it is me just being myself, and it gives them the license to be themselves as
Mm,
well. So yeah, vulnerability, humility, admitting you don't have all the answers, creating an environment where you listen to people and actually take action based on what they say as well, for me, so important. And it all links back to psychological safety for me, so much.
mm.
So I think, yeah, we,
I think
we,
we're
we
on the
have
same page.
similar ethos there on, we are indeed, we are indeed. Right, conscious of time, Sat. I would love to hear from you. If you could add one new theme to my retrospective backlog, what would it be?
Oh wow, okay, right. One new theme. Yeah, I've seen these. I've seen these. Right. Oh wow, okay. Okay, this is hot. This is a bit off the cuff because I forgot you were maybe going to ask me for one of these. So I don't know if you've ever done one of them before, but right. So I've actually had some work done in my garden today, believe it or not. I've had some gardeners in, and they've been tidying things up. Just make it look better. You're cutting back a lot of sort of hedges, etc. Cutting down trees. So I'm going to say to you, could you create something with a gardening theme The reason I'm also saying that is because I think there's probably a lot of nice kind of, metaphors in there, nice little things you could
Hmm.
perhaps tap into,
Yeah, yeah,
There you go.
absolutely,
That's hot off the cuff.
completely. No, I like it, and it's actually it's Pia Toran a few weeks ago. She's
Mm,
very active in the agile people world. She challenged the exact
yeah,
same thing, gardening, right? So the two of you now have given me this great one, and my mind goes to things like how are we growing our people. Imagine a trellis or those bamboo rods. How are we supporting growth? And there's lots of things you can do with and in positive ways metaphorically apply questions. I just need to think how I might visually represent it to make it a nice garden theme. But yeah, I'll do that.
nice.
Thank you for adding to my
Look forward to
backlog.
the output.
I will share it once it's done. We are at the end of today's conversation. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with any of the listeners today, Sat?
Any final thoughts?
I'm aware that sounds very
Keep,
Jerry
keep,
Springer.
keep,
Someone pointed that out to me
I
recently.
was gonna say, yeah, it's quite an open statement as well, right? I could go anywhere here. I'd say keep doing what you're doing. Keep learning, keep it positive. I think we've all been through quite a lot. Over the last 16 months or so. I think it's been challenging. I've suffered, some personal stuff myself, sadly, but I think keep moving forward. And I often like to say, only look back to see how far you've come. It's actually framed on my wall in front of me. You can't see it behind my laptop. Yeah, and I think everything will fall into place. Be patient. I think the world's going at this insane pace all the time, and I think we need to try really hard, including myself. Applies to me too. Slow it down a bit. Slow it down. Take time to look around, be present, because things seem to be at breakneck speed all the time. So yeah, there you go.
Wonderful sentiment, and one I can very much get on board with. I journal on a day-to-day basis, and one of the questions I ask myself every
Right.
day is how will you live for the present today? Because I think it's so easy for people to get either held up on the things that have affected them in the past, looking behind and allowing that to shape their future, or alternatively, always chasing that next goal, that next job, promotion, house, marriage, etc., and get so focused on the future that they forget to enjoy the present and live in the now. So yeah, I think it's a great final thought to leave on. So Sat, I really appreciate you taking the time to join the show today. It's been great to hear from you, your thoughts, your observations, your experiences. We are always looking for new guests to appear on the show. So if anyone would like to be involved, do reach out. And as always, folks, do not stop believing. Don't stop believing. Journey there. Love that. Bye bye.